Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is your host, Kevin McDonald, here from Qumulo.
And I'm Nick Wagner from Nerdio.
Today we are here to talk about how Azure native Qumulo and Nerdio can help save you money and make your life easier so you can focus on your business. Let's start with some quick definitions. AVD stands for Azure Virtual Desktop. It is a software as a service offering from Microsoft Azure that provides a full desktop experience. Nerdio. Well, Nick will speak to Nerdio, but essentially it is an AVD management suite that uses automation to lower Azure compute and storage cost and simplify management. Qumulo. Qumulo is a software solution for hybrid enterprises that efficiently stores and manages file systems at the edge, in the core, and in the cloud. Well, Azure native Qumulo, version 2. It is a cloud file storage service designed specifically for Azure in this case. It can be deployed directly from the Azure portal or, as we will demonstrate, from Nerdio itself. Nick, you are my guest. Can you speak to how Nerdio simplifies operations for AVD customers?
I sure can. So Nerdio is a management interface for Azure AVD. What we are attempting to do is to simplify and unify the management of Azure AVD and also include any other technologies that you might want to integrate into that environment. So we help you out with everything from creating and managing your images, creating the host pools based on those images, pushing out new version of the images to your host pool. And then we also help with some cost savings activities such as auto-scaling those host pools and right-sizing them so that you're never paying for more than you actually need at any given point. Nerdio also integrates with some other technologies, including Intune. We can create, apply, and monitor your Intune policies. We integrate with Winget for application delivery. Same thing for SCCM. And as we'll see here today, we also integrate very deeply with PowerShell scripting.
Let me add a little to how ANQ simplifies operations. I've worked with dozens of file systems in the past 25 years, both on premises, in the cloud, and data centers. I can honestly tell you that this is the easiest one I've worked with. We use the term extreme simple here, extremely simple, because it is. To deploy an ANQ cluster, you just need to fill out a few fields in the Azure portal and click Create. You can also use ARM, the Azure Resource Manager, Bicep, or even the REST API if that's what you prefer. Once the request is accepted, it takes less than 15 minutes to have a file system ready to mount. The interface is intuitive and not bloated with hundreds of menu options to navigate. If you prefer the CLI, it is feature-rich and provides helpful messages. Qumulo has real-time analytics built into the file system. You don't have to wait for an analytics job to run before you can analyze performance or understand how capacity is being used. I'll demonstrate that in just a few minutes. What do we mean by unlimited performance elasticity? Well, that's due to the architecture. Azure native Qumulo is a true scale-out file system designed specifically to run in the cloud. You can dynamically increase IOPS and throughput within minutes without the need to rebalance the data. From a cost perspective, like any true cloud service, you only pay for what you use. You don't have to pay for unnecessary file system overhead to keep the file system performing. That's built into our architecture. For the smaller AVD deployments, ANQ may not make sense cost-wise due to the nature of the scale-out architecture. The graph on screen has a break-even point around the 500 to 600 user profiles, so take that into consideration. Customers have been very creative, though. We have one customer that migrated a few enterprise applications into ANQ and as an afterthought decided to try it out for their AVD storage. It worked like a charm and they consolidated them together, saving their company money to be used for other purposes. Depending on your region, ANQ can be as low as $37 per terabyte month for hot or $10 per terabyte month for cold.
Now let's talk a little bit about how Nerdio can save you some money. As you can see from this chart here, the biggest single cost for AVD deployments is the VMs, the compute for those environments, the VMs that are actually, servicing user logins. But that can be followed pretty closely by the storage requirements, especially if your users demand quite a lot of very high performance storage. So what do we do to help you with these costs? Now, in this slide, you can see a chart here, and the top line is an unmanaged environment, right? So basically, you provision everything that you're going to need, you turn it all on, it's all running 24/7, and you're paying for it 24/7, obviously. So what Nerdio can do is, the first thing that we can do is we help with VM power management, and that knocks off that big chunk of VM cost, basically. And we do this through our auto-scaling engine. Now, Azure has a little bit of auto-scaling built in, but Nerdio gives you very fine-tuned control over all of your auto-scale, and we make sure that you're never paying for more than you need as far as compute in Azure. That means that we are turning VMs on as your users actually need them in response to user demand, but even anticipating user demand. And we have some AI and algorithms built into Nerdio that helps anticipate that user demand so that your users are never in the place where they're actually needing more power than is available. We can actually spin those VMs up ahead of time. And as the users log off at the end of the day, we're going to take those VMs offline so that you're not spending for that compute when you're not actually in need of it. Now, as I say, there's lots of bells and whistles, lots of knobs to turn in the Nerdio interface to really dial that in so that you are, only spending exactly what you need to at any given point for these VMs. Line number 2 then is just-in-time provisioning. That means that we can actually burst VMs into your host pools, VMs that aren't created ahead of time. We can actually do this kind of in real time in response to user demand. And that means that you're not spending for the storage for those OS disks when those VMs are off. So we save you a few dollars there on the OS disk storage because we are actually provisioning VMs in real time. The third thing is reserved instances. Now, obviously, you can buy reserved instances through Azure, but what Nerdio will do is that we will take a look at your environment and actually see how many reservations you should buy. And we surface that in a recommendation engine that we have for you. So we will tell you, buy X number of reservations for Y VM SKU, your DS8 VMs, and we want you to buy 5 reservations because those are the VMs that are on all the time. So through that recommendation, we save you money on those reserved instances. We can also auto-scale the OS disks of the VMs in the host pools, right? So when the VMs are off, when we have scaled them down with our auto-scale engine, we can actually cycle the SKU of those OS disks over to a standard HDD type disk. Because the VM's not in use, it doesn't matter if the OS disk is fast. And then before we turn those VMs on as part of our auto-scale activity, we actually swap that disk back to premium SSD right before we turn it on. Line 5 here is we can actually shrink the OS disks down to 64 gigs. These VMs in AVD, they don't necessarily need a ton of OS storage because all of the user activity, all of the user data is stored in FSLogix profiles. But nevertheless, all of the marketplace images are 128 gig OS disks. And that means you might be paying for storage that you don't actually need on those OS disks. So we can shrink your OS disks down to 64 gigs. That can knock 50% off your storage costs for those VMs. And then the last thing that we can do is we can help you shrink your FSLogix profile storage, any profiles that aren't being used or that have white space where users have deleted files out of those profiles, but they haven't been compacted. We can help make sure that those are all shrunk to the minimum size. And like I said, remove any profiles that are not currently needed. So that is how Nerdio can help you save some costs on this AVD environment.
In this section, I'll be performing a demonstration of how to create an ANQ cluster from within Nerdio Manager. All right, to start with, navigate to Scripted Actions and then Azure Runbooks. I called this scripted action ANQ Deploy Infrastructure. You can call it whatever you want. On the right-hand side, click the Edit button and then Run. For this demonstration, we have the secure variables on screen here, but you will create the customer-specific secure variables in advance in your environment. For example, the ANQ contact email address, ANQ admin username and password, ANQ cluster name, ANQ profile share name. There'll be instructions you can follow on the GitHub page where you can download the PowerShell script. Now, click Run Now, and you will see a new task be created under the Scripted Actions task pane at the bottom. It'll take about 15 minutes to run as the PowerShell script is performing the following actions for you. 1, it creates the ANQ cluster. 2, it joins Active Directory. 3, it adds the SMB share for the new user profiles for you. All right, I'll be right back when the cluster is created. Okay, I'm back. The script started at 6:01 a.m. and completed at 6:15 a.m., right on time for an ANQ file system create. Well, there was a 3-minute pause as we waited for Active Directory to propagate the new object. Let's take a look at the ANQ console. The cluster is joined to Active Directory, and the SMB share has been created. Back to Nerdio Manager. You can view the PowerShell script by clicking on the scripted action. Here's a quick look at the PowerShell script. We'll have this on a public GitHub for you to download and use. Nerdio's API allows you to create your own scripted actions pretty easily. You can even export a customer-specific Postman collection to view the available REST endpoints. Now, an ANQ cluster requires a DNS round-robin record to balance the clients across the IP addresses of the cluster. Use the fully qualified domain name, or FQDN, for the DNS round-robin record, and create the UNC path with the SMB share name. For example, anq.qumulo.com/profiles. From that point forward, it's a typical AVD setup. For right now, you'll need to create an FSLogix profile under Integrations FSLogix Profiles. Now you take the UNC path that you created and you add it to the VHD location configuration setting in the FSLogix profile, and you are ready to use it. Okay, here's a little tidbit. In Azure Automation Accounts, click on the Automation account with Scripted Actions in the name, navigate to Jobs, and then click on the last Enemy Scripted Actions job. Here you can see tabs for details about this job, such as input, output, where the script's full output is, errors, where to look if your script fails, and others. These are the current performance metrics for an ANQ AVD customer. This cluster hosts 5,000 AVD profiles. Looking at the data, you can tell that their workforce typically starts their workday around 7 a.m. and finishes around 6 p.m. Read IOPS are peaking around 17K and write IOPS peak at 64K. The total IOPS is about 80,700. Their workload is 80% writes, and their average block size is 20K. That's because it's very common for AVD profiles for the VHDX files to be updated frequently, and that's done pretty small. It averages out. During the weekend, they have little load, and I can see a large read job running, which is probably their full backups, I guess. During the week, they use Qumulo continuous replication to replicate data from this cluster to an ANQ cluster running in a different region. They do bi-directional replication as they have active users on the other cluster as well. If a disaster was to happen, they could scale up and host all of the users in a single region until that regional event is mitigated. Here's an example of an ANQ cluster doing 1.5 million IOPS. This was during a benchmark I was running last week. And yes, they are all read IOPS and small block, but the ANQ cluster was able to handle it with no issue. Now I will walk you through a demo of the SMB bench harness running a 100% Windows benchmark that simulates an AVD workload. I put together this architecture diagram so you would be familiar with what I am doing in this benchmark. I'm running 16 Windows 2019 servers as load generators and a ANQ cluster that is identical to the AVD customers cluster I discussed just a few minutes ago. SMB Bench uses PowerShell to manage FIO running on each of the servers. It dynamically creates the FIO configuration files, runs the process, and reports the results. To match the AVD workload, I have the FIO configuration set to be 100% random with a 20/80 read-write ratio. The AVD IOs are small updates to VHDX files and read IOs from the users as they do their work. This benchmark uses a 20K block size to match the real behavior. I've had this running for about 15 minutes and the benchmark is currently demanding about 45K read IOPS and 190K write IOPS. That's about 20% reads, which was my target. Throughput is about 4.8 gigabytes a second in total. Let's have some fun. Let's pretend your business expanded staff by 30% and you need to increase the performance capability of ANQ to match that anticipated growth. To increase the performance, you just need to submit a service request for an increase of IOPS of 30%. You should schedule the change as that is a best practice, but the SMB sessions won't drop. They will just be slow for about 30 seconds. We'll see ANQ's IOPS drop and then recover during that time, but it won't bottom out. Looking at the console, the change occurred around 10:12 p.m. and was done in about 28 seconds. Not too bad considering the capability. You could have scaled much higher. In fact, you could have scaled 10 times or more that performance. In a real environment, you would see the performance ramp up by 30% as the additional users log into the environment. Their sessions will automatically be distributed across ANQ. However, since this is a synthetic benchmark, I need to make a change to the FIO config for it to increase the generated load. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Once I restarted the jobs, IOPS and throughput met the demand and you can see the increase in performance. Read IOPS is now at 59K and write IOPS is about 240K. That's a 30% improvement, just what we asked for. ANQ is different than any other cloud storage offering. It is extremely simple and elastic. Here is a visual side-by-side comparison for monthly cost of Azure native Qumulo, Azure files, and Azure NetApp files. These are based on cost in East US 2. You can calculate your own savings using the ANQ TCO calculator at azure.qumulo.com/TCO-calculator. You can enter your specific customer details by clicking on the View Edit Assumptions dropdown. For example, your on-premises storage cost may be different than the industry average.
Thanks, everyone. If you're interested in a demo of Nerdio, you can check the link on this slide. And if you'd like to start your 30-day free trial, you can do that directly from Azure by going to the Azure Marketplace and searching for Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. But definitely reach out to Nerdio. We are here to help. And thanks again.
Everyone loves free stuff, right? You can try ANQ for 7 days at no cost to you using the link below. There is also a link to the SMB Bench GitHub repository, the ANQ pricing page, and the TCO calculator. Also, you will be able to download a recording of this webinar later today on our website. Thank you for attending the webinar today. I hope you found the information helpful. If you have any questions that were not answered in chat or have any feedback on this webinar, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can reach me at kmac@qumulo.com. That's KMAC@qumulo.com. Have a great day.